Imagine this scene. It's Friday, August 15th, 2025. All eyes are on Anchorage, Alaska. You see President Trump stepping off Air Force One.
Right.
Then President Putin's plane lands. Red carpets, the whole deal.
And then that flyover.
Yeah, the B-2 stealth bomber F-35's cutting through the sky just as they meet on the tarmac.
Quiet a statement.
Initial handshakes, some smiles maybe, and then something really unexpected. Putin gets into the beast,
Yeah.
the U.S. presidential limo.
Not his own car.
Yeah.
That definitely caught people's attention.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into that Trump-Putin summit, a meeting that, well, it's definitely stirred things up globally.
Absolutely.
Our mission here is to basically sift through all the reports, the news, the research, and pull out the key pieces of information for you.
So you can get up to speed quickly on what happened, what it really meant, and, the big questions it raises.
Especially for Ukraine and the bigger global picture. We want to give you that clarity, those aha moments, without grounding you in detail.
A shortcut to being informed, basically.
Okay, so that arrival, the spectacle was pretty intense, wasn't it? Almost cinematic.
It really was. And the setting itself, Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson.
Right, the old Cold War base.
Exactly. Strategically located closer to Russia than D.C., it immediately gave the whole thing a certain geopolitical weight.
And the optics. They seemed very carefully managed.
Oh, completely choreographed.
You had Trump coming down the stairs, clapping as Putin walked over, and then that flyover right as they met, the B-2, the F-35. That wasn't just a standard welcome.
No, definitely not. It was a greeting designed to send a message. And the symbolism there is worth unpacking.
Go on.
Well, the B-2 bomber, that's the ultimate symbol of U.S. military power, its global reach. It's like a pointed reminder, as some reports called it.
A silent threat, almost.
Pretty much. And then the really unusual bit you mentioned, Putin getting into Trump's limo, the Beast.
Instead of his own Urus, yeah.
It's a fortress on wheels, designed to withstand almost anything. It was a visual signal, maybe, that Trump was setting the terms, even down to the transport.
And the reactions were immediate, weren't they? People noticed everything. Trump struggling a bit to walk straight, Putin seeming to limp slightly.
Yeah, the body language experts had a field day. The handshake, Trump's apparent warmth, interpreted as approval, reassurance.
But the beast ride. Split opinions. Some called it a disgrace to America and NATO.
While others saw Putin smiling as the car went by and thought, maybe it's a sign of, trust.
It's fascinating how one action can be read in so many ways. The Kremlin likely saw it as asserting parity, forcing the West to acknowledge Russia.
And for Trump, it fits his image, right? The disruptor, the unconventional diplomat. It's almost like you could see the weight of the world in those small details.
Yeah, you can just imagine the headlines. So that visual spectacle set a certain tone, definitely. But let's move beyond the optics. What did each leader actually want from these talks? What were their agendas?
Okay, yeah, the actual objectives.
Trump's stated goal seemed pretty direct.
Yeah.
Achieve a ceasefire rapidly. Lay the groundwork for peace. He'd even vowed, famously, to solve it in 24 hours if elected.
Right. He framed the summit as a feel-out meeting.
To understand what Putin thinks, gauge his sincerity. But he also threw in a threat, didn't he?
He did. Mentioned severe consequences, possibly sanctions, if there wasn't progress towards peace.
So a mix of carrot and stick, maybe?
Yeah.
What about Putin? His goals seemed broader.
Definitely broader, more strategic. Remember, this was his first trip to the West since the 2022 invasion. First time in the U.S. in a decade.
That's a big deal in itself.
Huge. For him, it was about elevating Russia, making it seem like a peer, not a pariah. He wanted to talk resetting superpower relations, not just Ukraine.
And economics, too.
Yeah, economic cooperation was mentioned, plus nuclear arms control, a much wider scope.
Which makes President Zelensky's absence even more striking, doesn't it? He wasn't invited.
Right. And he'd been very clear he'd only meet Putin if Putin showed a real desire to end the war. And he warned against any deal made without Kyiv involved.
Ukraine's position is pretty firm, constitutionally even, about not giving up territory.
Exactly. Their borders are in the Constitution. Any change needs a referendum. That's non-negotiable for them.
So how did that absence, plus the united front from Europe and Canada saying Ukrainians decide their future, how did that shape the talks?
It definitely shaped the context. That strong message from allies, borders can't be changed by violence, limited the perceived scope of what Trump and Putin could realistically agree on regarding Ukraine's fate.
And the Ukrainian diaspora was watching closely, too.
Very closely. Ukrainian Canadians, for example, the second biggest diaspora, they expressed cautious optimism, but, understandably, deep distrust of Putin. They kept hammering home the need for territorial integrity.
Okay, let's try and peek behind those closed doors. What do we know about the actual meeting? It wasn't just one-on-one, right?
No, it shifted. Initially, it was expected to be just the leaders and interpreters, but it ended up being a slightly larger three-on-three format.
Who else was in the room?
For the U.S., Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. For Russia, Foreign Ministers Sergei Lavrov and Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov.
And the meeting went long.
Yeah, nearly 3 hours for that private session. So long, in fact, that they canceled a planned bilateral lunch.
Any hints about the atmosphere?
Well, there was that moment reporters saw. As the leaders sat down for the three-on-three part, reporters shouted questions about a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Putin apparently cupped his hand, said something nobody could hear, and then the press was quickly ushered out.
Intriguing. And the delegations themselves, you mentioned Lavrov earlier.
Right. The delegations, both sides brought economic officials, which again signals that wider agenda beyond just Ukraine.
But Lavrov's sweatshirt.
Ah, yes. The red sweatshirt with CCCP USSR in Cyrillic printed on it.
Feels deliberate.
Oh, absolutely. Coming from someone like Lavrov, it's not an accident. Ukrainian officials and analysts saw it as a clear provocation.
One analyst called it a middle finger the size of the Statue of Liberty.
That sums up the sentiment pretty well. It looked like a very blatant message about Russia wanting to reclaim its old superpower status, its Soviet-era influence, maybe.
All while Putin himself is facing an ICC arrest warrant.
Exactly. The optics, the symbolism, it was layered and complex.
So after all that, the long meeting, the symbolism, what was the actual outcome? Did they get a deal?
Well, no clear agreement on a ceasefire or a peace deal for Ukraine. Not the rapid result Trump had hoped for beforehand.
Trump himself said there's no deal until there's a deal.
Right, emphasizing it's ongoing. But interestingly, both leaders came out claiming great progress.
Great progress. What did that actually mean?
Hard to say definitively. Putin called the talks constructive and mutually respectful. He said he hoped agreements would be a starting point for solving the Ukraine issue and restoring business-like relations.
He also gave Trump a bit of a nod, didn't he? Agreeing the war wouldn't have started if Trump had been president in 2022.
He did. A little PR boost for Trump there.
But the press conference,
Very short, right?
just 12 minutes. And crucially, no questions taken from the hundreds of journalists there.
Which, as many reporters noted, did nothing to enlighten anybody, left everyone guessing.
Exactly. That vagueness is telling. Putin talked about addressing the primary causes of the conflict and needing a just balance of security in Europe.
But no specifics.
None offered publicly. And he warned Kyiv and European allies not to throw a wrench in the works, hinting some understanding was reached.
What kind of understanding, though?
That's the million-dollar question. The lack of detail keeps options open, allows both sides to spin it their way. For Putin, it maintains ambiguity, which can be useful.
Despite no concrete deal, Trump seemed happy. Gave it a 10.
He did. Said he and Putin get along great. And he mentioned briefing NATO and Zelensky, though that immediate follow-up summit with Zelensky in Alaska didn't happen. So the analyst's take was, Putin won.
That was a common conclusion, yeah. While Trump didn't lose, Putin clearly won, seemed to be the consensus.
Why? Just by showing up.
Primarily by breaking his diplomatic isolation. Being treated as an equal by the U.S. president on U.S. soil, that's a major win for him, domestically and internationally.
And he's seen as having time on his side.
Exactly. He's under no time pressure. His forces were reportedly gaining ground in eastern Ukraine at the time. Contrast that with Zelensky facing domestic pressures and Trump wanting quick results. It suggests different timelines, different pressures.
Okay, so clearly won implies more than just symbolism. What actual tangible gains did Putin get, even if they weren't announced?
Well, the symbolism is a tangible game for Putin's standing. But beyond that, the lack of immediate new sanctions was significant. And the mere fact that economic cooperation was discussed, even behind closed doors, suggests a potential path towards easing pressure on Russia. He also successfully shifted some of the narrative, framing the conflict partly as a broader European security issue, not just Russian aggression against Ukraine. That subtly dilutes focus on Russia's direct responsibility.
Okay, so Ukraine was central, obviously.
Right.
But other things were happening around the summit too, weren't there? Like that call Trump made just before meeting Putin.
Right, the call to Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus.
A very close Putin ally, mostly shunned by Western leaders.
Exactly. Trump called it a wonderful talk. Said they discussed releasing political prisoners 16 immediately, potentially 1,300 more. Lukashenko even invited Trump to Minsk.
How does that fit into the bigger picture?
Well, some scholars connect it to this idea of a potential shared imperial mindset between Trump and Putin. The location, Alaska, bought from Russia, the exclusion of Ukraine, the engagement with Lukashenko. It points to, as these scholars suggest, a kind of simplistic nostalgia for greatness combined with a belief in the right to dominate smaller neighbors. It's a framework for understanding some of the underlying currents.
A subtle historical echo.
Yeah, playing out in modern diplomacy.
And what about the economic side? Trump threatened consequences, but then nothing new announced.
Correct. No new sanctions announced immediately after. And remember, Russia's delegation included economic officials.
Right.
Sources suggested they discussed economic cooperation, things like possible U.S. access to rare earth minerals in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine.
Wow, that's significant. Rare earths are critical for tech.
Hugely critical. And also talk about potentially lifting some sanctions on Russia's aviation sector. That would be a big deal for their airlines.
So how do these economic threads and diplomatic side moves fit into the long game for both countries? What does it signal?
It signals complexity, definitely. It suggests that even amidst conflict and sanctions, channels for potential cooperation, or at least discussion about cooperation, might exist, especially where mutual interests align, like those minerals, perhaps.
And the media reaction reflected this.
Very much so. Russian media generally painted it as a win for Moscow, Putin breaking isolation. Ukrainian media, understandably, remained pretty dour, concerned about the lack of a ceasefire and being left out of direct talks. The economic hints suggest potential shifts in power dynamics down the line.
So to wrap up, this Trump-Putin summit, it didn't give us an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine?
No clear deal on that front.
But it was absolutely packed with symbolism, wasn't it? The arrival, the beast ride, Lavrov's sweatshirt.
Revealing complex agendas, often pulling in different directions.
And that elusive great progress they both mentioned. This deep dive really shows that sometimes what isn't said, what isn't agreed upon publicly, can be just as important as what is.
Absolutely. The subtext was almost deafening at times. So here's something to think about. We live in a world that's just overloaded with information, right? And diplomatic theater, like we saw in Alaska, can easily hide what's really going on or not going on.
Right.
So what's our responsibility as informed citizens to actually dig past the headlines, past the claims of great progress, and figure out what's truly strategic maneuvering versus, well, actual substance? How do we make that distinction?